The summer sun hung low, casting elongated shadows on the grass as Jamie brought the car to a stop near the edge of the park. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard, his heart thudding beneath his ribs. The nervous flutter in his stomach wasn't excitement, but rather the weight of what they were about to do. He could feel the gravity of the situation, the unspoken tension between him and his mother. He didn't know how this would end, but he knew that today was necessary. Next to him, his mom, Linda, sat quietly, her face a mix of trepidation and something else, a glimmer of hope, perhaps. It had been a long time since they had taken any time for themselves, let alone together, and that unfamiliarity was why Jamie hesitated now. Linda glanced at her son, sensing the uncertainty he was feeling. She gently reached out to touch his arm, her fingers grazing his sleeve. "Are you sure about this?" Jamie whispered, his voice so low it almost disappeared into the sound of the summer breeze that blew through the open car window. Linda took a deep breath, smoothing her hair behind her ears as she considered his question. She looked at her son, her eyes filled with a mixture of emotions, hope, worry, and something more. "I know this is unconventional, Jamie," she finally said, her voice steady. "But I think we need this. Just one afternoon away from everything, away from all the pressure and chaos of our lives." She looked out at the park, where families were playing, laughing, and soaking in the last rays of the day. "I think we both need it, don't you?" Jamie sighed, his shoulders relaxing slightly as he nodded. He knew she was right. Ever since his father had left, everything had been a mess. Linda had thrown herself into her work, trying to hold everything together, trying to be strong for him. But Jamie could see through it. He could see her exhaustion, the sadness she had behind her smiles. The same sadness he felt. Their relationship, once full of laughter and warmth, had grown strained over time. They had drifted apart, and neither of them knew how to come back from it. "Okay," Jamie finally replied, his eyes scanning the surroundings to make sure no one was watching. He turned off the car and opened the door, stepping out onto the pavement. He took a deep breath, the smell of freshly cut grass filling his nose. "But we have to be careful, Mom. If anyone sees us," his voice trailed off, the unspoken fear hanging in the air between them. Linda smiled at him, her eyes softening as she got out of the car and walked around to his side. "I know, Jamie," she said, her voice calm. She gently squeezed his arm, offering him a reassuring smile. "This is just for us, just a little break." "All right." Jamie nodded, taking a deep breath as they started walking towards the park. It was a warm day, the kind that made everything feel alive. The park was bustling with activity, kids chasing each other, parents watching from benches, couples strolling hand in hand. It was almost surreal how normal everything seemed. For Jamie, it felt like they were stepping into a different world, one where the weight of their lives didn't exist. One where they could just be themselves, without judgment or expectations. They walked in silence for a while, neither of them quite sure how to start. It had been so long since they had done anything like this, and the silence between them felt awkward and heavy. Jamie glanced at his mom, noticing the way her eyes scanned the park, as if she were searching for something. Finally, Linda pointed towards a small grove at the far end of the park, surrounded by tall trees that offered some privacy. "How about we go over there?" she suggested, her voice barely audible over the sounds of the park. "It looks quieter, and we can talk without anyone overhearing." Jamie nodded, and they made their way towards the grove. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers, and as they settled down on a bench beneath the trees, Jamie could feel the tension in the air between them, thick with all the unspoken words and emotions they had been holding back for so long. Linda looked around, her eyes softening as she took in the sight of the park, the children playing, the families gathered on blankets for picnics. "Do you remember when we used to come here as a family?" she asked, a wistful smile tugging at her lips. "Your dad always brought that old plaid blanket, and we'd have picnics right over there." She pointed to an open patch of grass near the grove. Jamie smiled, a flicker of nostalgia crossing his face. "Yeah, and you used to make those awful sandwiches," he teased, nudging her gently with his elbow. "I swear, No one else in the world would think to put pickles and peanut butter together. Linda laughed, the sound like music to Jamie's ears. It had been so long since he had heard her laugh like that, genuine, carefree, like she didn't have the weight of the world on her shoulders. I thought they were creative, she protested, shaking her head with a grin. You love them. I tolerated them, Jamie corrected, a smile spreading across his face. For a moment, the weight of everything else seemed to lift, and they were just a mother and son, reminiscing about better times. But as the laughter faded, Jamie felt the familiar heaviness settle back in. He looked at his mom, his expression growing serious. Mom, he began, hesitating slightly, what are we really doing here? He looked down at his hands, fidgeting with a loose thread on his jeans. I mean, I get that you want us to spend time together, but it feels wrong sneaking around like this. Linda's smile faded, and she looked at him, her eyes filled with sadness. She reached out, placing a hand on his arm. I know it feels strange, Jamie, she said softly. But sometimes you have to break the rules to find your way back. I just wanted us to have a little time, just the two of us, without all the noise, without all the things that have been pulling us apart. Jamie looked at her, his heart aching at the pain in her voice. He knew she was right, they had both been lost, struggling to find their way back to each other in the aftermath of everything that had happened. I miss us too, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I miss when things were easier, when we were closer. Linda smiled at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. We can get back there, Jamie, she said, her voice filled with determination. It's going to take time, but we can get back there. We just have to keep trying. Jamie nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that they could find their way back to what they once had. He looked around the park, watching as a group of kids ran past, their laughter echoing through the trees. He turned back to his mom, his expression softening. Let's just enjoy today, okay? He said. No expectations, no pressure. Just us. Linda smiled, her heart swelling with love for her son. Just us, she agreed, her voice steady. They sat in the grove for a while, talking quietly, the laughter of the children and the distant sound of a fountain creating a soothing backdrop. For the first time in months, Jamie felt a sense of peace wash over him, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. After a while, the conversation turned to lighter topics, funny memories from Jamie's childhood, stories about Linda's work, plans for the future. They laughed, and the tension between them seemed to ease, replaced by a warmth that Jamie hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As the sun began to set, casting the park in a golden glow, Jamie looked at his mom, a smile tugging at his lips. Do you remember that time we got caught in the rain here? He asked, leaning back against the bench. You insisted we stay and finish our picnic, even though we were completely soaked. Linda chuckled, her eyes brightening at the memory. You were so mad at me, she said, shaking her head. But I thought it was the perfect moment. The rain, the laughter, it felt like something out of a movie. I was soaked and grumpy, Jamie replied, laughing. But you were right. It ended up being one of the best days. Linda smiled, her eyes filled with nostalgia. Sometimes the unexpected moments are the most special, she said softly. It's like life is telling us to let go of our plans and just enjoy what comes our way. Jamie looked at her, sensing the weight of her words. He knew she was talking about more than just that rainy day. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. I get that, he said. But it still feels strange, you know? Sneaking away like this. Linda sighed, her smile fading slightly. I understand, she said. It's complicated. But after everything that's happened, I just wanted us to feel like a family again, even if it's just for a little while. Jamie nodded, his heart aching at the sadness in her voice. Maybe we can find a way to reconnect without all the secrecy, he suggested, his voice softening. I want that too, Mom. I really do. Linda looked at him, her eyes filled with hope. You're right, she said, her voice steady. We should focus on being open with each other. It's just hard to find the right moment. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts. Jamie could feel the tension easing, and he realized how much he missed these honest conversations with his mom. The park, once a backdrop for their fractured family, was now a sanctuary for their reconnection. Let's make a pact, Jamie said suddenly, turning to look at his mom. No more hiding. We'll find a way to spend time together without sneaking around. Linda's eyes lit up at his suggestion, a smile spreading across her face. I love that idea, she said. We can plan little outings, just like we used to. No need for anyone else to know, if that makes it easier. Exactly, Jamie said, feeling a sense of hope blossoming in his chest. We can keep it casual, just you and me. Suddenly, a loud crash broke through their moment, and they both turned to see a child had fallen from a swing nearby. His mother rushed over, concern etched on her face. Jamie and Linda exchanged a worried glance, momentarily pulled back to reality. Maybe we should head back, Jamie suggested, the earlier excitement dimming slightly. I don't want anyone to see us here too long. Linda nodded, the smile fading from her face. You're right, she said, her voice quiet. Let's keep it low-key. They stood up, folding the blanket and gathering their things. As they walked back through the park, Jamie couldn't shake the feeling of how fragile this moment had been. They had almost crossed a line, but instead, they had stumbled upon a deeper connection. It felt like a turning point, one that might lead them back to a healthier relationship. Once they reached the car, Jamie turned to his mom, a small smile tugging at his lips. I'm glad we did this, Mom, he said, his voice sincere. It felt good. Me too, Jamie, Linda said, her eyes softening. Let's make sure it's not a one-time thing. We'll figure this out together. Jamie nodded, feeling a sense of relief. They hadn't found all the answers, but they had taken a step toward healing, and that was enough for now. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for more videos.